Hey there, this is Conflict Tales. You won't believe what went down this time. Let's dive into the madness. Homeowner Association just raised my fees by 500%, claiming I had too many cars parked in front of my property. They had no idea I owned the entire neighborhood. It started with a letter. A thick red envelope stuffed into my mailbox, stamped with urgency. I wasn't expecting anything, but the moment I pulled it out, I had a feeling something was off. The notice inside was direct and aggressive. My monthly Homeowner Association fees had increased fivefold due to a vehicle congestion issue on my property. According to them, my tenants' cars were an eyesore, a disruption to the peaceful aesthetic of the community. It was absurd. My properties were well maintained, my tenants followed all the parking rules, and the streets were never congested. I reread the letter, my irritation growing. The signature at the bottom confirmed my suspicions. Karen Reynolds, president of the Homeowner Association. I had dealt with her before. She thrived on control, loved finding reasons to make people's lives difficult. But this time, she had gone too far. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just another homeowner she could push around. I had more leverage than she could imagine. I took the letter inside and called my daughter, Sarah, a second-year law student who had been helping me keep tabs on the Homeowner Association's increasingly aggressive policies. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, let me guess. More Homeowner Association drama?" She sighed. "Oh yeah, they raised my fees because of too many cars." I could hear her rolling her eyes through the phone. "That doesn't even make sense," she said. "They can't just arbitrarily increase fees like that. Did they hold a vote?" "They claim they did." I scanned the document again, but I never received a notice. "That's illegal. They're required to inform all homeowners before making changes to fees." Sarah was right. I had been a landlord in this neighborhood for years, quietly acquiring properties whenever the opportunity arose. I preferred to keep things low profile, but the truth was, I owned nearly half the homes in this community. And as the rightful landowner of multiple properties, I should have been notified. But Karen and her cronies clearly didn't want my vote counted. I decided to pay Karen a visit. She wasn't expecting me when I knocked on her door, and the look of surprise quickly morphed into her usual smug expression. "Mike," she drawled, folding her arms. "What a surprise. Something wrong?" "You tell me," I replied, holding up the letter. "Since when do you get to raise fees without proper notice?" She smirked. "The board voted, majority rules." "And when was this vote?" "Oh, about 2 weeks ago," she said, tilting her head. "You must have missed the notice. Maybe check your spam folder." I narrowed my eyes. She was lying. Funny. I checked with a few other homeowners. They didn't get a notice either. She waved a dismissive hand. "Look, if you can't afford the new rates, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." I clenched my jaw but forced myself to stay calm. "I don't think you understand, Karen. You don't get to just rewrite the rules because it suits you." Her smirk widened. "Oh, but we do. The Homeowner Association Charter gives us authority to regulate community standards, and excessive cars ruin the aesthetic." I wanted to laugh at her audacity. Instead, I took a slow breath. "We'll see about that." I walked away, but I wasn't done. Karen had made a fatal mistake. She assumed I was powerless. But I had an ace up my sleeve. While she played her little power games, I had quietly secured something far more valuable: legal ownership of the land beneath this neighborhood. It all started years ago when the original developer of this community went bankrupt. The bank had auctioned off the underlying land rights, and I had purchased them without anyone realizing. That meant the Homeowner Association technically existed on land I controlled. They had been operating under the assumption that they were in charge, but in reality they were leasing the very ground they walked on. But I needed proof. That's when fate intervened. That evening, my elderly neighbor Greg, who had lived here longer than anyone, knocked on my door. "I heard what they did to you," he muttered. "They've been pulling this stunt for years, picking on people they think can't fight back." I invited him inside, and he placed a dusty old folder on my kitchen table. "I kept copies of all the original land deeds from when this place was first developed," he said. "Figured someone might need them one day. I flipped through the papers, my pulse quickening. Everything I needed was here. Documents proving that the Homeowner Association's authority had been misrepresented from the very start. They had no legal right to impose extra fees beyond basic maintenance costs. Everything Karen had done was, in essence, fraud. I grinned. "Greg, you just gave me exactly what I need." He chuckled. "Good, someone needs to take them down a peg." The next morning, I called Sarah. "I need you to help me prepare a legal case," I told her. She didn't hesitate. "I'm on it." Karen thought she could control this neighborhood. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. Karen had no idea what was coming. I spent the next few days gathering everything I needed, combing through the documents Greg had given me, cross-referencing them with the legal agreement Sarah pulled from county records. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. Karen and the Homeowner Association had been playing fast and loose with the rules for years. They had no legal standing to impose arbitrary fees, and, more importantly, they had no idea they were essentially squatting on land they didn't own. Sarah was thrilled. "Dad, this is solid. Not only are they violating their own charter, but the way they pushed this fee increase. Completely illegal. They didn't notify property owners properly. They forged documents to make it look like a vote happened, and they're using community funds in ways that have nothing to do with neighborhood maintenance. This is a goldmine." I smiled, proud of her sharp instincts. "Then let's make sure Karen and her friends feel the heat." I made my first move by requesting an official financial report from the Homeowner Association, something all members had a legal right to see. As expected, Karen stalled. "Oh, we're still compiling the latest reports," she told me over the phone, her voice dripping with fake concern. "These things take time." I kept my tone calm. "That's fine. I'll just file a request with the county. They might find it interesting that you're refusing to provide documents you're legally required to disclose." There was a long pause before she spoke again, her tone noticeably tighter. "I'll see what I can do." The next morning, an official letter from the Homeowner Association appeared in my mailbox, stamped urgent. I opened it and let out a dry chuckle. They were now claiming I was in violation of several community standards, including the number of tenants in my rental properties, the color of one of my fences being non-conforming, and, of course, the supposed parking issue. Each infraction carried a hefty fine. It was an obvious intimidation tactic, and it only made me more determined. That afternoon, I met with Luis, the grocery store owner who had also been targeted by Karen's nonsense. "They're trying to run me out of business," he muttered, shaking his head. "If I have too many customers at once, they call it a public disturbance. If I don't, they claim I'm not maintaining adequate community engagement. It's a joke." "Not for much longer," I assured him. "They've been getting away with this because no one's fought back the right way. That changes now." With Sarah's help, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, citing every violation we had uncovered. We sent copies to the Homeowner Association, the County Housing Authority, and our lawyer, who was more than happy to get involved once he saw the evidence. I also made a few quiet phone calls to homeowners who had complained about the Homeowner Association for years, but felt powerless to act. Once they realized I had hard proof of misconduct, they were eager to stand behind me. The next Homeowner Association meeting was scheduled for the following week, and I planned to be there in full force. But Karen, unsurprisingly, had other plans. The day before the meeting, she sent 2 Homeowner Association board members to my house. They showed up unannounced, smug and self-assured, clearly expecting me to back down. One of them, a balding man named Richard, took the lead. "Mike, listen, we understand you're upset, but we run a tight ship around here and everyone benefits from that. If you drop this little crusade, we might be able to work something out." I folded my arms. "Like what?" He smiled, as if he were doing me a favor. "A reduced fee adjustment. We'll reconsider your case, but you have to agree to stop interfering with Homeowner Association matters." I laughed, shaking my head. "So you're admitting the fees are arbitrary?" His smile faltered. "I didn't say that." "No, you just implied it. And here's the thing, Richard. I don't want a deal. I want transparency, and I want Karen to stop treating this neighborhood like her personal kingdom." The other man, Joel, spoke for the first time. "You really want to pick a fight with us, Mike? We have ways of making life difficult." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough to make my point. "You don't own this land. And when I'm done, neither will your precious Homeowner Association." They left, clearly rattled. But I knew Karen wouldn't let things go that easily. I expected pushback. I just didn't expect it to come in the form of a police officer knocking on my door the next morning. I wasn't surprised to hear a knock on my door the next morning, but I hadn't expected it to be a uniformed officer standing there, arms crossed, a clipboard tucked under one arm. His badge read Detective Rivera. He had the look of a man who had dealt with too many suburban disputes and wasn't in the mood for another one. "Mr. Turner," he said in a tone that was firm, but not aggressive, "we've had multiple complaints about disturbances on your property. I need to ask you a few questions." I leaned against the doorframe, keeping my expression neutral. "Disturbances?" Rivera sighed, flipping through his notes. "Loud arguments, illegal construction, reports of suspicious individuals coming and going at all hours. Seems like a lot of activity for a quiet neighborhood." I had to give Karen credit. This was a new level of petty. "You're kidding, right? You think I'm running some kind of criminal enterprise from my house?" He didn't respond immediately, just studied me, as if he was trying to gauge whether I was the type to snap under pressure. "I'm just following up on complaints. You got any issues with the Homeowner Association?" I exhaled slowly. "Yeah. They jacked up my fees illegally, started targeting my tenants, and now they're making up nonsense complaints to get me to back off." Rivera gave a slow nod, as if this wasn't the first time he'd heard something like that. "Mind if I take a look around?" I had nothing to hide. "Be my guest." He walked the perimeter of my house, checked my driveway, took a glance at my backyard, and seemed to lose interest when he realized there was nothing even remotely suspicious. When he returned, he jotted something down in his notepad. "I'll file my report. But off the record, Homeowner Association disputes can get ugly. You might want to be careful." I narrowed my eyes. "That sound like advice or a warning?" He tucked his notepad away. "Just saying, some people don't like losing control." With that, he left, and I was left standing in my doorway watching him go. Karen was getting desperate, which meant I was getting close to something that scared her. Sarah called an hour later. "Dad, you need to see this." I met her at the coffee shop downtown where she had her laptop open, scrolling through scanned financial records. "I went through the Homeowner Association's filings with the county," she said. "They claim to be a nonprofit, right?" I nodded, sipping my coffee. "That's the legal setup. Well, nonprofits have to report where their money goes. And look at this." She pointed to a section of the report highlighting a series of payments labeled consulting fees. Over the last 3 years, they've paid nearly $200,000 to a company called KR Management. I frowned. "Never heard of them." "Because they don't exist," she said. "At least not in any real capacity. It's a shell company, registered under one person." I stared at the name she had highlighted. Karen Reynolds. Sarah grinned. "Your Homeowner Association president has been funneling money out of the association and into her own pockets." I let out a slow breath. That explains why she's fighting so hard to shut me up. "If this gets out..." "She's finished," Sarah said. "She could face criminal charges if we push hard enough." That gave me an idea. "We're not taking this straight to the county just yet. I want to see how Karen reacts when she realizes we know." The next Homeowner Association meeting was the perfect opportunity. I made sure to get there early, watching as Karen strutted in with her usual smug confidence. The room was full of homeowners who had no idea what kind of game she had been playing with their money. That was about to change. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front, holding up a folder thick with evidence. "I have some concerns about how our fees are being managed." Karen sighed, already impatient. "If this is about your parking violations, Mike, I really think—" "It's not about parking," I interrupted. "It's about where our money is going." I opened the folder, pulling out the financial reports. These payments labeled Consulting fees. They don't go to any contractors or maintenance teams. They go to KR Management, a company owned by you. The room went silent. Karen's face paled. That's ridiculous. Is it? I held up a copy of the business registration showing her name. Because the county records say otherwise. Murmurs spread through the room. Some homeowners started pulling out their phones, looking up the information themselves. Karen shifted in her seat, trying to regain control. This is a gross misinterpretation of the facts. I didn't back down. Then explain it to us. Right now. Where did $200,000 of our money go? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She was cornered, and she knew it. Then she did what I least expected. She stood up and stormed out. The room exploded into chaos, homeowners demanding answers, board members scrambling. But I wasn't done yet. Karen had run, but she couldn't hide from what was coming next. The chaos in the room didn't settle quickly. Karen had fled, leaving a stunned and increasingly angry crowd behind. Homeowners murmured, whispered, and then began shouting over each other, demanding answers. The Homeowner Association board members, clearly caught off guard, looked at one another in desperation. I stayed where I was, letting the tension build. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Sarah stood next to me, arms crossed, a triumphant smirk tugging at her lips. She ran, she whispered. That means she knows she's guilty. I nodded. Now we make sure everyone else knows it too. A man in a pressed blue polo, one of the remaining Homeowner Association board members, tried to regain control of the room. He cleared his throat, stepping forward. All right, let's all calm down, he said, his voice lacking confidence. I'm sure there's an explanation for all of this. Maybe Karen stole our money, someone shouted from the back. Another homeowner, an older woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, held up her phone. I just looked up KR Management. It's registered under her name. Are you people serious? You've been letting her drain us dry? Louise, the grocery store owner, wasn't having any of it. I've been paying through the nose for years while she's been stuffing her pockets. That's it. I want my money back. Who's in charge here? The remaining board members exchanged uneasy glances. Without Karen leading the charge, they were weak, uncertain. They'd relied on her authority, her bullying tactics. Now they were exposed. I stepped forward. There are two options, I said, keeping my tone firm but controlled. One, you call an emergency vote right now and remove Karen from her position officially. Then we bring in auditors, figure out exactly how much she's stolen, and move forward with legal action. Two, you stall, try to cover for her, and every single one of you goes down with her. Silence. The weight of the moment pressed down on the room. Some of the board members looked like they wanted to argue, but they saw the anger in the crowd. Finally, the man in the blue polo let out a shaky breath. All right, emergency vote. All in favor of removing Karen Reynolds as Homeowner Association President effective immediately. A sea of hands shot up. Not a single vote against. Sarah grinned. That's step one. One of the board members, a wiry woman named Linda, hesitated before speaking. Look, we weren't all in on this, she said quickly. Karen handled all the finances. We just signed off on things. That's not an excuse, I interrupted. If you're on the board, you have a responsibility. Either you start working with us or you go down with her. Linda swallowed hard. Okay, we'll cooperate. What do you need? Full financial records, Sarah said, stepping up. Every transaction, every expense report. We'll compare them to the bank records and see how much was siphoned off. Linda nodded, looking like she regretted every decision that had led her to this moment. Fine, but Karen has a lot of influence. She's not going to just disappear quietly. I smirked. I'm counting on it. Karen didn't disappear. She did the opposite. The next morning, I woke up to a legal notice shoved under my door. I unfolded it slowly, already knowing what it would say. As expected, Karen was fighting back. She'd filed a defamation lawsuit against me, claiming that I had made baseless accusations against her and damaged her reputation. Sarah skimmed the document, letting out a low whistle. She really thinks this will work. She's banking on intimidation, I said. She wants to scare us into backing off before we dig too deep. "Joke's on her," Sarah said, tossing the papers onto the kitchen counter. "We already have enough to prove she's guilty. All we have to do is escalate." That's when Luis called. "Mike, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice sharp with anger. "Karen's been making calls all morning, trying to get businesses in town to cut ties with us. She's telling them you're a liar and that you're trying to destroy the Homeowner Association for personal gain." I clenched my jaw. She wasn't going down without a fight. "All right," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Then let's give her something real to panic about." Sarah leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" I met her gaze. "We take this to the state level. We're not just talking about homeowner association fraud anymore. This is embezzlement. And if she's using those funds to manipulate local businesses, that's racketeering." Luis let out a low whistle. "You really want to go nuclear?" I nodded. "She picked this fight. Let's end it." By the time Karen realized how deep she was in, it was too late. The financial records we obtained were damning. Payments to KR Management were only the tip of the iceberg. There were personal expenses disguised as neighborhood improvements, unexplained withdrawals, and tens of thousands of dollars missing entirely. We compiled everything into a report and sent it straight to the state attorney's office. Then we made sure the press got a copy, too. The fallout was immediate. News outlets picked up the story, running segments on corrupt homeowner association practices, citing our case as a prime example. Homeowners who had been on the fence about speaking up came forward, sharing their own stories of being pressured, fined, or harassed by Karen over the years. The community turned against her overnight. Karen's lawsuit? Dismissed before it even had a chance to make it to court. The evidence was too overwhelming. But the best part came a week later when I got a call from Detective Rivera. "She's been arrested," he said simply. "Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion. She won't be running any homeowner associations where she's going." I hung up and turned to Sarah, who was already grinning. "We won." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Yeah, we did. Luis showed up that evening with a bottle of whiskey. "To taking down the worst homeowner association president in history," he toasted. We drank to that. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Homeowners who had once cowered under her authority were now speaking out, sharing their own stories of harassment, intimidation, and financial abuse. The media had latched onto the case, and the scandal was now being dissected on local news stations. Every time I turned on the TV, Karen's mugshot was there, accompanied by headlines about homeowner association fraud and corruption. But even with her gone, there was still work to be done. The Homeowner Association board scrambled to regain control, trying to salvage what was left of their organization. A few of them even approached me, feigning regret. Richard, the balding board member who had tried to strike a deal with me weeks ago, showed up at my door. He had the decency to look embarrassed. "Mike, we were in a tough position," he said. "Karen controlled everything. We didn't know the extent of it." I leaned against my doorframe, arms crossed. "You signed off on everything she did." He swallowed hard. "Look, we need new leadership. Someone to clean up the mess. The homeowners trust you. Maybe you should run for Homeowner Association President." I laughed. "That's the last thing I want." Richard hesitated. "Then what do you want?" I gave him a hard look. "Dissolve the Homeowner Association." His eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm dead serious. Karen was just a symptom of a bigger problem. Homeowner associations like this exist to control, not to serve. The homeowners don't need it. We can manage our own properties without some bloated bureaucracy dictating every little thing." Richard paled. "There are legal processes, and we'll go through them," I said. "We have the votes. The community is done with this nonsense." The next Homeowner Association meeting was unlike any before. Gone were the smug, self-important board members dictating policy. Instead, the homeowners took center stage. They demanded answers. They demanded change. And when the time came for a vote on whether to dissolve the Homeowner Association entirely, the result was overwhelming. 85% voted in favor. I sat back as the motion passed. It was over. The Homeowner Association that had terrorized this community for years was officially dead. Over the next few weeks, we worked through the legal hurdles, ensuring the dissolution was airtight. The neighborhood adjusted surprisingly well. Without the Homeowner Association, there were no arbitrary fees, no ridiculous fines. People started taking more pride in their homes, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. One afternoon, Sarah and I sat on my porch, watching the street. Kids played freely, unbothered by the ridiculous parking restrictions Karen had once imposed. Luis waved at us from his store, finally free from the constant fines that had threatened his business. Even Greg, the old-timer who had given me the crucial documents, looked more at ease, as if the weight of years of oppression had finally lifted. Sarah sipped her iced tea, smirking. "So, what now? You've officially dismantled an entire homeowner association. What's next on the agenda?" I chuckled, enjoying the peace and quiet for a while. She nudged me. "You're not the type to sit still. You'll find another fight." I thought about that, watching the street, the people, the neighborhood finally free. "Maybe," I admitted. "But for now, I think I've earned a break." Luis walked over, holding a six-pack. "For the man who freed the neighborhood," he said, handing me a beer. I cracked it open, took a long sip, and let out a satisfied sigh. Karen had tried to control this neighborhood. She had used fear, manipulation, and corruption to keep people in line. But in the end, justice had won. And as I sat there, enjoying the freedom we had fought for, I knew one thing for sure. No homeowner association would ever pull this stunt on me again.